the whole purpose of the story we want to tell ourselves is, where do we tell it from? If we tell it from the head, then it is sometimes out of our control, chattering away, fearful, judgmental, higher ego, arrogant. All these come from the head. And if it is from the body, then it is driven by fear or worry or anxiety or trying to keep up with the head or whatever it's trying to do. But if you learn how to balance it at the heart, then you are in resonance with your higher consciousness, with that dance, that spanda of Shiva and Shakti. And in that knowledge, you are acting from your highest self in the world. Essentially, we are storytelling creatures. We are the only species that remembers by storytelling and gossiping that we know of. Maybe dolphins and chimpanzees do too, but as far as we can see, we can store these memories, we can share them, we can pass along stories. In fact, thousands of years of stories is what led us to this place right now. And if you understand that, you understand that we are basically a storytelling creature. We live and thrive on stories and gossip and legends and myths and sharing information. That's how we have survived. That's why we're such a dominant species on this poor planet. This is what has made us like we are. And the craving to be felt, to be heard, to have immortality, to be identified. This is a very old palm painting in a collage of multiple palm paintings together, mixed together from the caves of the sun. And you can see that even the artist there 40,000 years ago was trying to leave his signature and experimenting with art form and playing around with his hand. And whether it had a sacred meaning or not didn't matter. He left his signature for us to see. His palm, his hand. We want to be seen. We want to live forever. We want to not die. We want immortality. This is what we need and want. And if you look back to ancient cave art, it's very much stories of either two kinds. One, some kind of ritual process in preparation for something to happen, a hunt or a local ceremony or whatever. And this could be a secret code for the witch doctor or the shaman to practice his craft or to take his ayahuasca or his special medicine and go into the other world and bring back knowledge and wisdom. Who knows what this purpose of this drawing is to that person? This was always the dual nature of stories. And when you look at the nature of stories, when you tell your own life story, there are always two, what we call the exoteric and the esoteric. Exoteric means the anabhupaya, the story of that keeps us bound in society, in community, in religion, in myth, in culture, all these kinds of things. Anavapaya means of the ordinary person, popular stories, fables, songs, images, statues, mythological ideas, religious ideas, ritualistic ideas. In today, you could imagine even put into cinema and television and reality TV and all these things into the exoteric expression of the human storytelling urge. But there's always been, from the very ancient times, esoteric substance to stories. It means that a few people have coded ideas into stories in order to relay mysteries or secret knowledge or codes for other practitioners to remember. And this has always been the case. This is what we call Shaktopaya or Sambhavapaya or Anupaya. secret, encoded, initiated, revealed, discovered, experienced wisdom. And in fact, the ancient people have been encoding this for thousands of years for us in oral traditions, in written traditions. And why have they done that? And you can understand if I don't have to go far back. If I talk about, let's say, Cinderella, the Disney film, and we talk about Prince Charming, the radiant sun, has to come and awaken sleeping beauty, and with true love's kiss. And this idea being that every morning the sun rises at the dawn and tries to awaken the dawn. And then they go through a terrible separation as the sun rises away and the dawn is left without the sun, sleeping in dormancy. And then by the time the sun sets and goes into the underworld and goes through and fights dragons and demons and all kinds of things in the underworld, it comes back up and once again it makes love to Sleeping Beauty. And she awakens once again for the whole day. But it's a daily cycle of torment and journey and torture that that the sun and her have to go through every day. The sun's chasing the moon. There are other stories around that. The stars are hosting all this drama at night. There's stories about them. The planets are hosting are playing games with those journeys of the moon and the sun. The moon goes through 15 phases. Everything is some kind of narrative that a human being looked at and said, oh my God, look at that. Let's codify it, let's mystify it, let's put it into a story. So now we have 15 chants of the Choudhury, of the Lalita Tripura Sundari, to remind us of the 15 phases of the moon. We have 7 matrikas, who are the 7 stars of Orion's, of the great plow. We have, it just goes on and on and on for the ancients to make sense of this universe we're living in. And the same thing is true for mystical experience. We try to make sense of these shifts in consciousness that occur. Why on earth should I have bliss experiences and experience illumination and feel the grace of divinity coming into me? Why? And if I don't have a story, how do I share it with other people? How do I tell you that I'm sitting in London, in New York, and I had this experience, and everybody, wow, that's a cool, good story, right? Really speaking, you can't tell anybody about these experiences. You can say, it was as if you can use Shakespeare or Kalidas or whoever, whatever poet you want to tell that story. You're telling a story to help other people understand your altered state of consciousness experience. And that's what mystics have done from time immemorial, is to try and tell stories about what they're going through, right? And when you look at it, people who share esoteric truths have more in common with each other, mystics, shamans, than they do with people who are rigorous practitioners of the ordinary religions of mankind. I have more in common with a Sufi and a sadhu or a Kabbalist or a mystical Mayan elder or an ayahuasquero than I do with a practitioner of Hinduism or Christianity. I forget any of the other religions. I have more in common with those mystics than I have with Hindus, because I can talk to them in esoteric terms about experiential nature of this universal consciousness that I'm experiencing. How else can I talk? Who else can I talk to? Nobody. And nobody else I can talk to. If I talk to somebody who goes to church and I tell them that Ma Kali comes to me, they'll call me the devil and burn me at the stake probably. Even if I had said that Mary Magdalene spoke to me, that would kill me. even if I was amongst Christians or Muslims or Hindus. We kill each other at the drop of a hat. Ridiculous. Just over exoteric expressions of mystical, mysterious, wonderful things that we experience. And I was talking about the phases of the moon. Entire goddess culture is built on three things: the gestation cycle of a woman and nature and the moon. Everything we think about in Sri Vidya, in Kali Vidya, are the phases of the moon, you know. And they are the phases of the mother, gestating and giving birth and feeding, nurturing to her breasts and feeding the world. This is Egypt, and that is Kamakya, Lajja Gori on the right. Same idea. The big vagina, the big breasts, feeding the world, menstrual blood, cycles of nature. And if you think about it, ancient stories created places. So most of sacred feminine worship throughout the early Neolithic age of mankind, last 10, 15,000 years, was about place. A place would have a Shakti, a place would have a goddess, an Amba or a Kali, and a place would have that energy. And that energy would be considered to be a goddess. And she would be in the forest, she would be in the house, she would be in the householder, she would be in the ritual. There weren't temples as such, but there were these places that people could do this, and people remembered places in the storytelling by the goddesses that lived there, by the energies and yoginis that lived there and roamed there, by the mystic sadhus who visited there. Those stories became the story of the culture, and they've come down to us as rishis, as seers, as druids, as shamans, as great, you know, apostles and saints, and these stories have come down to us by place, always by place, and when we think about the nature of place in this world, where also the geometries that came out of it were to do with that idea that an energy could take me to the central one. That was a place for me to go, a place for me to find the mother in the womb, inside the cosmic womb. It was a place. So I could enter a cave and experience this. I could go into a ritual in a temple and experience this. I was living a story each time I did one of those rituals. So going to this place that I was creating in my own head to alter my consciousness to see the Divine Mother inside my head. Always altering my consciousness, always altering my consciousness. And then we were obsessed with the sun, not just places and the cycles of nature and the moon, but the sun and the ultimate solar deity that mankind has known we're celebrating this weekend. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was Sol. And to understand the mythology of Jesus Christ, you have to understand the story of the sun's journey. The sun in March 21 in Aries comes into bloom in the spring on the equinox, and then peaks in the solstice on June 21st in the northern hemisphere. And this curve is called the elliptical. The middle line is the equator. And the sun travels like this curve. And then September 21st, on the longest night, the sun dips and goes into the underworld where it has to be reborn again. And it comes back after its baptism and comes into resurrect. It comes and becomes, it does its mission as awakening in the lower underworld. And then December 21st, it is the peak of its condition. And the sun is then reborn by resurrection at this time. And by the next March, it rises again. So December 21st, we're reborn, resurrection occurs, and off we go again. And every day this cycle goes, this one whole year cycle goes on. winter in the northern parts and summer in the southern parts, and it keeps cycling, cycling, cycling. And these three phases were captured very nicely by Joseph Campbell. He called them separation, initiation, and return. And what he was saying was that forget Jesus Christ, forget the Son. Think of your own life. You are born, you are raised in a family or in a community, and that becomes your status quo, that becomes your reality. And at a certain point, you are called to leave that safety of the status quo and take a journey into the unknown, into initiation, into the underworld of the sun dipping, into the darkness of unknown things, growing up, going to college, living on your own, getting a job, whatever. You can just imagine the cycles that one has to go through. And then you go through the unknown, you meet people who mentor you, who coach you, who teach you, who help you, and you get tools and magical skills, and then you come back up and you start to shine as a person. And then you're reborn and you have your own family. And the cycle continues and you pass on to the next one and it keeps going. The quest is that I started at one place, I went through initiation of some kind, I come out of it a wiser person, I give that to my family and the world, and I continue. That's the eternal story that Joseph Campbell was able to identify as the hero's journey. This idea. And when we look at it, there is no reason to think that all religions, all mythologies, all mystical experiences are not just versions of this story. This is a beautiful study done by a very interesting fellow. I'll share the data with you later, who has studied the whole of Israel as a map of the spinal cord and the brain and the claustrum. And he has looked at the places of the mission of Jesus, of Galilee. And, the Golgotha was the skull, was known as the skull, where he was the third eye of Ida Pingala meeting of crucifixion of the two thieves and him in the middle meeting, and in the Golgotha in the middle of the skull. And his mission begins in the Dead Sea. And there's this entire encoding in the story that if you begin to explore, you as an esoteric seeker will see the parallels. And in fact, I'll introduce you to a thinker called I'll come to it in a second, who said that the entire Bible was imagination to explain esoteric mysteries. And the Torah was actually a play of language. So if you look at the 22 alphabets of the Hebrew language and their relationship to the Sephirot, and then our obsessions with Tantra, with the Kundalini and the Sanskrit letters along the body, you see that very early on, the storytelling mysteries became about sound and the body and the consciousness of God all being correlated in some way. And in fact, all the great traditions of the world use sound to awaken the body. And when we think about that, we go deeper. This idea of Kundalini, for example, this on the left side is from Mesopotamia, 2500 BC. The one in the middle is the Sephirot from Hermeticism and Kabbalah that looked at the body as the occult anatomy of God, that we were in the body of God and we are the body of God. And in Kundalini, you see this idea that the chakras are actually part of the biological, neurological system of the body. That you go through it and you get the endocrine system, you get the nerves, you get the whole thing, the pancreas, and each one is a god or goddess, and each one has a power, and each one can be activated. So this kind of neurotheology of the body as a biological tool for awakening was also a major part, which included hallucinogenic substances and things like that throughout history. So this was another story we were telling ourselves, This was a huge story we were telling ourselves. And then there was the bigger stories that started happening, where we started mapping the heavens. And we divided the heavens into 12 houses of where each one went as the sun went round the year. And we would find ourselves with groups of stars that we could see in the background that seemed to form heavens. And by the way, if you go from Aries downwards through Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, you actually have the northern hemisphere sun days, the sunnier time. So you plant your crops in Taurus with the bull, you water it with Gemini and Aries, and then you Cancer, you fertilize it and you give it life. And Leo, you farm and harvest it all. And Virgo, and then you go into the underworld of night and you go to Libra, Scorpio, and that way, and you furrow the soil, you burn the crops, you do rituals, you let the gods know that you're asking them to come again, and you keep going all year round. And these houses determine life for ancient people in deep, deep ways. So not only did we go lunar cycles, but we went into star cycles and the bodies of the planets within these stars, the seven moving bodies. And then we went even further and we said massive cycles of time were begun to calculate. And in fact, this was the real beginning of the male gods. The idea of the wobble of the earth called precession led us to what is called the Great Year, that it takes 25,772 years for the earth to wobble once in a full circle, like a top spinning, it wobbles. And when it wobbles, the houses change of the 12 zodiac signs. And each house changes once every 2,160 years. That means that if on the solstice, if you looked out east, on the equinox, if you looked east from particular places in the world, where the sun rose on that day, you would see on that eastern side that star system that we were in at the moment. So, for example, for the last 2,000 years, it has been rising in the east in Pisces. And now it is going to rise in Aquarius. So we're moving from Pisces to Aquarius over the next 100, 200 years. Isn't that fascinating? So just imagine the elaborate nature of stories that we mankind have put together. We haven't even begun to put together mystical stories of quantum particles properly and new ideas of science. And we haven't even begun that yet. We haven't begun it at all. But the question always has been, from the very beginning, is what about me? Me, 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 me. I don't think that people always say, oh, the ancient people were one collective consciousness. Bullshit. Everybody thinks about me. What's going to happen to me, then my family, then my tribe, then my cultural group, then my this, then it's like me outwards. Anybody tells you that the people sitting in that Stone Age gathering were not thinking, why didn't I get the fire? Why didn't I get to be with that woman? Why didn't I get the shaman's, blessing? Are you kidding? They all have the same problem. They all had the same problem. We were psychologically required by storytelling to have that disease. We have the same brain as they did 40,000 years ago. Why would it be any different? Same stupid brain, same envy, same stupidity, same all the shit we have, right? Joseph Campbell was the great theoretician and anthropologist and kind of psychologist also, who wrote a series of books called The Hero with a Thousand Faces that compared the stories of all of mankind through the ages. And he found something that he called kind of formula that seemed to be the epic nature of man's storytelling, humankind storytelling. And these were a couple of quotes from him. He says that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And another thing he said was that this is his most famous quote, follow your bliss. That means follow your true nature, your heart. And the universe will open doors for you where there were only walls. Follow your bliss, and the universe will open doors for you where there were only walls. If you read anybody, you should read Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung to understand human nature. You must read them. This is how I came to this work. Them and Blavatsky. So Joseph Campbell said that the quest is like the universal quest for everybody, is essentially everybody goes through the same three issues in life. We go from a status quo that things are all hunky-dory, separation, desire creates something. Ichcha, we call it Ichcha in Tantra and Shakti. And we go from the outer world, which is the world of my family and the safety of my loved ones and normal job I had, to meeting strange man called Raja and other people like him, and bang, my whole life is upside down. And why did it happen to me? And normally it happens because you've had some trauma in your life, or you've had questioning, and you've had an experience from childhood, but you're not able to replicate it, and you needed it again. You wanted to return. So you get to this point where you go from the outer world to the inner world. We call it the threshold. And you go into some kind of initiation occurs, where you're given new knowledge. And then once you get that new knowledge, you go through this pain and torture and experiences, and then you learn, you die and are born again, and then you come up and you return to the world. And oh boy, the world is not the same. You look at the world and you say, I don't know you. Who are you? You look at your family and you say, oh my God, who are these people? Who have I come to? And the funny part is that you return, but I'm going to talk about that. You return as a master or a controller of both worlds. You are now from the underworld and a master of the overworld as well. So when you come back, you're a magician. You're a liar. You have nothing. Nothing bothers you. Nothing worries you. You are, Luke Skywalker returns. That's it. You return to face your demons. You faced your demons. You have died and are born again. So nothing will trouble you. But at first, when you leave initiation, you don't want to go back. But then something propels you to go back. Like Buddha said, I only returned because I was feeling compassion for all sentient beings. Right? That's a return of a hero. Right? He goes, I came back to serve mankind. Right? That's a heroic return. Right? You can't get more heroic than that. Jesus died on the cross for us. Heroic. Right? And then he returns as omniscient, omnipresent resurrection in every one of our hearts, right? Ma Durga goes away for 9 months and then 12 months and comes back again and cleans everything up, does the whole hero's adventure, and then off she goes, and then you bring her back again, and she keeps coming back over and over again. These cycles are never ending in our psyche. Even the smallest thing we do in life has that story. This 3-part story. And in fact, I'm a filmmaker, as many of you know. And when we make a film, we actually crafted on Joseph Campbell's 3-stage part of the story. Right? Any filmmaker you talk to will say, what's a 3-act structure? And they'll tell you. And if you watch a film carefully, you will find a 3-act structure in most of the best films will always have a 3-act structure. And a 3-act structure is that the first 10 to 20 minutes, la da 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 da, I'm going on with my normal life, and then something falls on my head, bang, and my whole life goes upside down. Boy meets girl, things mess up, nuclear bomb drops, and I don't know, earthquake happens. It's all gone wrong, and I go on an adventure. Boom, inciting incident occurs. Then Act 2, I go through this adventure, and then the girl says no, her father wants to kill me. All this stuff happens. You have, the villain comes and fights you. Everything is good, and you're going through this, and then you come to the climax in Act 3, and you think it's all over, but no, there's another climax, and then boom, you come down, and boy gets girl, whatever, blah 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 blah, and mother-in-law says, "I like you, son," and it's all good, and boom. Denouement, they get married or whatever. This is the eternal tale of a filmmaker's drama. No matter what film, try and watch any film and tell me you don't see the structure after a while. You start seeing it. You say, oh my God, there was that key moment where they had the trauma. 20 minutes into the film, Raja was right. Exactly 18 to 20 minutes into a film, something terrible will happen that will put everything into craziness, right? And then they'll have to go on a journey, adventure of some kind. This is the wonder of it all.